Owen's back. If you're only just switching on, he was here a few minutes ago to tell us about European markets opening very flat. Doesn't look so bad for now, but you're more concerned about the midterm impact, aren't you?
Yeah, because this is all priced in, Stuart. It's particularly on those opening numbers on the European markets. Don't be too misled by those. The real issues are cuts further down the line, the midterm, for example. And right now, France, the problem with France is it's no longer really an equal partner, despite what you might hear from the government. No longer an equal partner in these whole European negotiations. Remember that France and Germany are the ultimate guarantors for these Eurozone bailouts, indeed for the whole of the Eurozone. And yet France is a very different prospect now to Germany. If we look at, for example, the borrowing costs for these two countries, look at the yield on French 10-year bonds. That's the amount that investors demand from the government to hold their debt for them. France, around 3%. OK, that's not catastrophic when you compare it to a country like Greece or indeed Italy or Spain. But look at the difference with Germany there. In Germany, the borrowing costs are almost half that. In fact, things are so good for the Germans that you now have to pay the German government for the privilege of lending to them. That's how far through the looking glass we're with for all of this. If only the French could get yields that low right now.
And of course, if those borrowing costs continue to rise, puts further stress, doesn't it, on public finances?
Yeah, understandably. That's the big worry. If you're a saver, if you're a borrower here in France, what does that mean for you? Well, it means basically that the banks are going to end up passing on increased borrowing costs to you. When a country gets downgraded, banks pretty much automatically get downgraded because they cannot have a better credit rating than an actual country. We've seen French banks, for example, this morning, their share price dipping by around between 2 and 3%. So it's bad for savers. It's also bad for the country as well. On Thursday, France is going to try and auction off, or it should auction off, around 9 billion euros of new debt. But that auction we watch very closely to see how much they have to pay for that in terms of borrowing costs. If you look further down the line as well, France has around 290 billion euros of debt maturing this year. Now, no one's saying that they're not going to be able to refinance that. They will. But at what cost? It pushes the borrowing costs up. Remember, this is a country that has to bring down its borrowing costs to around 3%, or bring down its debt, I should say, to 3% of GDP by 2013. Suddenly, it looks like an awful uphill struggle with those new numbers and that downgrade.
Complicated stuff, perfectly explained as ever by Owen. Now, that France downgrade has ramifications, are called, far beyond its own borders. After Germany, France contributing the most to the bailout of countries like Greece. And Greece has new problems of its own, with the agreement on a second bailout in real trouble of collapsing. To succeed, it needs private investors to write off up to half their investments. But some, well, they're just not playing ball. Here's Oliver Farry.
The Troika arrives back in Athens Monday night as negotiations continue to secure Greece's next much-needed bailout payment. The big stumbling block is the Greek government's wish for hedge funds to take a hefty 50% haircut on its debt. But private investors who hold 80 billion euros of Greek debt say they did not sign up for that. They're still trying to hammer out terms with the Greek government in talks that will continue Wednesday. Prime Minister Lucas Papademos reiterated last Friday that even a successful negotiation will come at a price.
Our ability to negotiate well and achieve the best possible outcome is linked to our ability to address the source of our problems inside the country.
The Troika of the IMF, EU and European Central Bank is to restart discussions on a 4-year programme of new structural reforms. Greece's receipt of a €130 billion aid package depends upon it. It needs it to pay a debt redemption scheduled for early March. Regardless of the outcome of the talks, the outlook for Greece is bleak in the extreme, with the 5th successive year of recession certain for this year.
Now, Standard & Poor's also said the European Financial Stability Facility's credit rating, that's also under threat. The bailout fund needs foreign investors from cash-rich countries like China to maximise its lending capacity. Earlier, we asked our Beijing correspondent, Shannon Van Sant, if Europe now looks like a less attractive investment.
Investors are looking for countries with a AAA rating, and of course France's credit rating downgrade, as well as other European countries, endangers the credit rating of the European Financial Stability Fund. And that's precisely at a time when the fund needs and is looking for investors like China to invest and to help Europe out of this financial crisis. So I think many investors right now, they're looking for safer places to put their investment, but at the same time, investors like China, they don't want to see Europe fail, but they also want to minimize their risk.
That was Shannon Van Sant reporting from Beijing. Just to end on this, Stuart, what a time for the UK Finance Minister, George Osborne, to go to China. He's there this week, basically selling Britain as the ultimate safe haven, a very safe investment vehicle. Remember, Britain still has its AAA rating, and we're seeing massive inflows of capital into this country as people take flight from the Eurozone and decide to put their investments in the UK. I'm not sure whether he'll go as far to say, look at France, they've been downgraded, but you get
Quietly,
the feeling.
maybe.
I think that's quite the kind of sentiment that he's going to convey. We should leave all that alone now because the Eurozone, of course, remains a risky bet for many investors. Bonds looking very risky. Even stocks aren't really a certainty in these troubled times. But what about water? Its finite supplies means that there are always growing demand, and it's seen for many investors as a safe haven. But as Siobhan Silk reports, it's proved to be the trigger for many violent riots.
The economic crisis has proven even investment vehicles once perceived as bomb-proof, like bonds, aren't so stable. Some investors are eyeing up another opportunity: water.
We've seen in the last 25 years water's reached the same price level as that of oil, but with much less risk and less volatility.
Demand for water is on the up and up around the world. As the population rises, so too does the draw on global water supplies. From 7 billion people today, the Earth's headed for 9 billion in 2050. Financial gains through water companies may be modest, but they've ticked up gradually, providing solid returns. The American water company, for example, saw its share price rise 30% over the last year. But critics say private companies shouldn't make a profit on what should be a basic right. Mexico and Bolivia have seen violent clashes over water rights. In Europe, trade unions have come out against privatisation, and many cities are resisting it. After many years run by a private company, the city of Paris's water system reverted to public ownership. Last June, Italian voters overwhelmingly rejected privatisation. Investment managers say it's in the interests of water companies to put ethical practices into place.
From our point of view, companies that launch a product with good practices and work well with their environment have a better chance of being profitable.
Despite the controversy, private companies continue to pour money into water, the one commodity no one can live without.
That's it from us. We will, of course, keep following the Eurozone crisis. Owen will, at least, on the programme over the next week or so. Stay with us here on France 24. Clay's got the latest after the break.
This is Kim, about to feel one of his favourite sensations. At Shell, we are developing more efficient fuels that can help us to get the most from our energy resources. Let's use energy more efficiently. Let's go.